Thanks for tuning in online to Community Church. As a church, we are focused on sharing the love and hope of Jesus with everyone we meet. We hope you enjoy today's message.
So we're on week 2 of Room. Hopefully you were able to check out the message from Pastor Michael last week. It was awesome about knowing that we need to be present, and sometimes present is actually perfect in our life. But week number 2 is all about schedule. How many of you guys get excited about talking about some schedules in the room? There's a few of you, like maybe 5 in the whole room. See, here's the thing is that schedules aren't something that we like to talk about, but they're super important. There's really nothing sexy about a schedule. We don't go home and we're like, oh yeah, I can't wait to write this schedule out. It's trying to find the beauty. It's like trying to find the beauty in the budget. It's not easy to do, but here's my hope at the end of service today that we'll be able to bring sexy back to our schedules. Come on with me. Be able to look at our schedule at the end of the day and go, oh yeah, that is looking good. You see, today's message was originally titled Room in My Schedule, but I thought it'd be fun to rename it something because nobody wants to waste their time. So our schedule or our series today, our message today is called Ain't Nobody Got Time for That. Come on, we don't have time to waste our time. See, time, it's a non-renewable resource. We have a limited amount in our day. We want to make the most of our time. We would all say that our time is valuable. We don't go to the DMV and say, you know what, guys, just take as much time as you need. I got all day. No problem. We're not driving through fast food saying, you know what, if it takes 3 hours for my cheeseburger McDonald's, it's fine. It's not a big deal. My favorite example is this, is if we get a phone call from a telemarketer, we're not like hanging up right away, but instead we're saying, you know what, I got all the time in the world. Please, please, please tell me about the timeshare in Antarctica that you have for me. Give me all the details to it. I don't think there's anybody in the room who says, I've got time for that. Ain't nobody got time to waste. We all value our time. It's valuable, but the problem is that sometimes I devalue certain things in my schedule. I overvalue other things. I'm a time optimist most of the time. Do we have any time optimists in the room? Meaning that if you look at a project, you're like, you know what, that'll take about 3 hours, but in actuality, it actually takes about 3 weeks to get it done. Talk to somebody, you know, I think I can build that house. Yeah, just, an hour or 2. No, that's not how it works. Sometimes I lose track of time. But here's my hope. Here's what we need to understand. Write this down if you're taking notes. It says, my purpose is not just to fill my day, but rather make sure my day is fulfilling my purpose. I'm going to say that again because that's something we got to know. It says, my purpose is not just to fill my day, but rather make sure my day is fulfilling my purpose. God has a purpose for every single one of us, and I want to schedule a life of purpose. So I want to have an activity to interact with you a little bit. How many of you guys have your calendar on your phone, and how many of you actually use your calendar on your phone? Go ahead and get it out for me for just a second. If you do it, just take a look at it. You can pick any day of the week you want to, but check out your calendars. And I want you to go straight up toddler on your calendar. Open the day up, and I don't mean throw a fit because you can't control your day and you're mad about the activities that you've already got scheduled. But I want you to act like a toddler by asking the question, why? Any parents of toddlers in the room where the question you get is why? 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 Look at your activities throughout the day and go, why? I'm waking up at 5 a.m. Why? Because I'm crazy. Why am I going to work at this time? What? Why am I hanging out with my friends? Why am I doing this? Because when we can answer the question why, we understand the purpose. What makes it really fun is if you actually take your calendar and hand it to somebody else and have them evaluate what you're spending your time doing. You may rethink those 16 hours you blocked off in the month of November to watch the re-release of Gilmore Girls. I'm just saying, maybe somebody needs to hear that in the room. What are you scheduling? What's your why behind what's on your schedule? So a few things we need to know about our schedules is that there's only a limited amount of space in our schedule. I have an example here from my son Elijah. I asked him before service to pack a bag for one night. I said, just pack a bag for one night. This is what he packs for an overnight bag. If you can't tell, it's filled to the brim. If I move the wrong way, it will probably open up and all of his stuff will fall on the floor. Sometimes what happens in our life is we try and pack our schedule full of things so that at any moment it can burst and all the personal stuff will lay out there. How many of you are, maybe, don't raise your hands, maybe a little bit concerned that if you misschedule your life, your schedule is so filled that your personal stuff will end up out there for everybody to see. We've got to be careful, and we've got to think through, what are we packing our schedule with? Any parents of kids in the room who ever asked your child to go pack an overnight bag, you really have no idea what's going to end up in that bag. Why do you have 27 pairs of socks, but you forgot to pack a toothbrush? We can find ourselves in the same place with our schedule, that we can oftentimes put the wrong things in it, things that don't matter as much, but our schedule is full. The other thing we have to realize is, not only is my time limited, is space limited in my schedule, but my schedule also impacts those around me. It's not just my schedule, it impacts those around me. My favorite example of this is a few years ago, my wife, Susie, and I, her dad came down to visit, and during his visit, we decided to watch a movie. And he said, you guys choose. And so we picked our favorite movie to watch, Napoleon Dynamite. Anybody ever seen Napoleon Dynamite? Like, teenagers in the room, if you haven't seen that movie, if you just want like a slew of one-liners to tell your parents and to annoy them like crazy, like that's it. Like, Napoleon Dynamite is full of one-liners. And so we sit down, we're so excited to watch this movie, and we're talking all throughout it with all the one-liners that we knew, like, Tina, eat your food. And like the whole movie, we're talking about this, and we're so excited about it. And at the end of the time, we look at him and we go, what'd you think? What'd you think? And like stares at us dead in the eye. And he says, that's an hour and a half of my life I will never get back. So it made me reevaluate how we spend my time. My priority is not always somebody else's priority. But I want to put the most in my life. I want to put the most in my schedule to have the greatest impact. It's important for us to know what we're doing. You see, Psalm 90:12 says it just like this. It says, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. I love the depth of this verse, because even though it's one sentence, even though it's a short phrase, it tells us that I want to make my days count. God, I know my days here on earth are numbered. Let me make my days count. Now, the truth of this verse is that if I'm a procrastinator, if I put things off, if I'm not making my days count, what happens then is I can't gain a heart of wisdom. First, I have to be intentional with my time. I got to be intentional with what I'm doing in order to be wise with the time that God's given me. I've got to be intentional with it. And here's where we start. So I've got to start with identifying what's important. I've got to know what my priority is. I've got to identify what's important. So I have an example of what I want to share with you, and it involves candy. So you know when that happens, it's a good day, right? It involves candy, it's a good day. So I have some examples. So let's say this jar right here represents my day, and I get to choose what I fill my day with. And these nerds are what represent like the things that are kind of meaningless, the tasks that I do, things that really don't matter. This is a little bit more important, but these items right here are the most important, the things that I say have the most value in my life. Well, if you're like me, sometimes what happens is I find myself not planning out my day, but filling it with things that don't matter, or things that are just a little bit meaningless. There it goes. I'm not worried about that one. That's gone. And so what happens then is I try and fit the important into my life, but there's no room in my day because I've filled it with things that are unimportant, because I haven't scheduled out, I haven't created a priority in my life. You see, the Bible puts it this way. It's the exact opposite of this. It says, if you seek the kingdom of God first and his righteousness, all these other things will be added to you. Now, we might get a little bit spiritual here, but I'm not going to ask you to guess which one's Jesus between the Crunch Bar or the Snickers. That's not what I'm saying, but we're just saying these things identify things that are important. And so then what happens, if I put those important things first, then I can fit everything else into my schedule because I made a priority of what matters. I made a priority of what's important. And the way we make a priority, this is what we have to do, is we have to make planning a priority. Write that down. Make planning a priority. Any planners in the room? They're like, this comes naturally to me. Wow, there's a few of you. That's awesome. I'm not. Like, it does not come naturally to me. Like, I don't plan. But I need to make planning a priority. See, I started planning my day, and it's amazing the difference that it makes when I plan my whole day out. I put when I'm going to wake up. I put when I'm going to wake my kids up. I put in there when I'm going to go work out. I put in when I'm going to take the kids to school, and when I'm working. I guard my time at the end of the day about when I'm going to pick my kids up, about when I'm going to be intentional with hanging out with them. Because when I put that plan in place, I try and follow that plan, and I ask myself the question, why, in every activity that I do. See, Proverbs 21:5 says it this way, puts a priority in planning. It says, careful planning puts you ahead in the long run. Hurry and scurry puts you further behind. Careful planning puts you ahead. Go and underline the word careful. Circle the word careful, because we have to be careful with our planning. But instead, hurry and scurry puts us further behind. And any verse that says hurry and scurry is just kind of a fun verse to say. Maybe you have a new favorite verse, a verse you can remember because it includes hurry and scurry. But does anyone feel like your life is full of hurry and scurry at times? I find myself certain days, if I'm not careful, what will happen is I'll be completely confused and feel like I'm focusing on too many different things and not actually be able to accomplish what I set out to accomplish because I've got so many different things going on in my life. I feel like certain days I live a life of hurry and confused scurry. But God doesn't want us to do this. He doesn't want us to do that. He wants us to live a life of purpose. You know, if you've ever been to a circus, I heard this story. You may have ever been to the circus before you guys have gone to the circus. I'm not saying your household is a circus, so you can't say I've been home and my house is, but like actually been to the circus. One of the coolest things to see is you go and you see the lion tamer and the lions. And I read a story about this. Now what happens for the lion tamer is he walks into the cage, but he's got a gun and he's got a whip and he's got a stool. Now, you may already know the answer to this, but don't tell anybody because I want to share. It's going to be like really impactful. But what happens is the lion tamer takes that stool, and because it has 4 legs on it, and he puts it towards the lion can't focus on one specific thing, but instead it's trying to focus on the 4 different points, and it puts itself in paralysis because it can't be focused on one thing. How true is that for you and for me in the room, that when I try to accomplish something, my attention is fragmented. It's unfocused. I can't do what I'm supposed to be. I can't live a life of intentionality. I can't have an impact because I'm focusing on too many things. Just like the lion is overwhelmed, I'm overwhelmed with everything that's going on in my life. So what do I do? How do I combat this paralysis? I have to understand something, that my productivity begins with my thought process. That if I'm not careful, I can live a life that's busy but not productive. So I want to live a life of productivity, but it begins with my thought process. Like I got to be thinking about what I'm thinking about. We talk about a list of priorities. Does anyone in the room have a list of priorities? No one? That's great. Okay, cool. That's good. I do. That's good. This is very interactive, so just get your hands ready to go up and down. I have a list of priorities, and the problem with that is it's plural, not singular. I should have a list. I should have a priority, not a list of priorities. See, it means prior thing. It means the thing that's more important is what priority means. And so what does that look like for me is that I have a priority of the day. I have the priority of the hour. I have the priority of the minute. I can stay focused on the thing that matters most. You see, sometimes we find ourselves in this place that even as I'm talking, you're realizing that you don't have control of your schedule. Somebody else does. And so how do I live a life focused on one thing when someone else is controlling my schedule? Teenagers, do you feel that way in the room? Some of you, yes. Parents of teenagers, do you feel that way in the room, that somebody else controls your schedule? In your workplace, somebody else controls your schedule. But we have to look at it from a place and understand that even if I don't have complete control of my schedule, I can still make the best of the situation. So I have to have a perspective of purpose, because this perspective of purpose makes the most of every moment. We have to be intentional with every point of our day. It's not easy, but it's simple. Because when I'm intentional, here's what happens. Intentional time produces exponential results. If you're taking notes, write that down. Intentional time produces exponential results. Maybe you can look at this in your life. I can definitely look at it in my life. Because I realize that time that I spend with my kids, if I choose to take a focused hour with my kids, at the end of the day, what happens is they realize that they're important and they're valuable to me. If I spend an hour a day with my wife, focused on her, learning more about her, it has exponential results. It means our relationship becomes closer for my kids. When they know that they matter, then they take that understanding that my dad cares about me, and they live that out throughout their day. And then when they have kids, they understand what intentional time looks like. And so their kids are impacted by the amount of time that I had spent with them. See, our intentional time produces exponential results. I've heard it said that if you spend an hour a day focused in a particular area, at the end of a year, you will be an expert in that area. Here's the key word of that: focused time. It's hard to be focused all the time. Like, this message has been very convicting for me because I'm not naturally a planner, and it's difficult for me to stay focused at times. Like, I'm the guy who is having a conversation and I switch topics and talk about something else. I call them squirrel moments. Does anybody know what like a squirrel moment is? If you've ever seen the movie Up and the dog is like focused and the squirrel walks like a squirrel, like that's how I live my life. I have tons of squirrel moments. I get off topic, focused on the squirrels. Speaking of squirrels though, here's the thing. Is that I heard a story of a guy who had a bird feeder in his backyard, and he kept getting squirrels into his bird feeder. They would find a way to get into the bird feeder, so he builds a cage around it to keep them out. And with a few days, the squirrels learned how to get into the bird cage, so he built a bigger cage, a better cage. And a week later, the squirrels found a way to get back into his bird feeder. So he goes to his neighbor and he asks the question, why is this happening? I've tried to create a cage, but they keep finding a way to get into it. And his neighbor says to him, you spent a few unfocused minutes on building this cage, but the squirrels focus all day, every day, on how to get into it. Their focused time, because being intentional produces exponential results. So my prayer is, God, please help me be more like squirrels. That's not true. I don't pray that. But I do ask God to give me wisdom to be intentional. Don't let me be distracted by the unimportant, because ain't nobody got time for that. See, being intentional also means that I learn to protect my time. I guard my time on things that are important. Now, if you're a people pleaser in the room, don't raise your hand. You can keep them just right down here. But if you struggle with pleasing people, sometimes what happens when you try and guard your time is that you can't say no, and you struggle to guard your time. It's almost like no is a four-letter word. You don't want to use it because you want to say yes to everyone who asks you to do something. But the problem with saying yes to everything is ultimately what you're doing is saying no to something else. See, the important thing for us is we have to know what we're saying yes to in order to say no to something else. If you're taking notes, write this down. It's much easier to say no when you know what you're saying yes to. I've got to know what my priority is. I've got to know what I'm saying yes to, what's important in my life. See, I might be saying no to a night with the boys, but I'm saying yes to a stronger relationship with my wife because we're going on a date instead. I might be saying yes to building trust back. I might be saying yes to her knowing that she matters. I might be saying no to staying late at work, but I'm saying yes to my kids that you're important to me. I might be saying yes for them to know that they're valuable and I care about them. Teenagers in the room, if you're saying no to hang out with your friends instead of your parents, you'll be saying yes to your parents giving you something free. Kind of how that works. Not really. Sometimes, though. Actually, it does, because here's what happened. Let me just share a story with you. My daughter, Emma, she's 12 years old. We were at a conference a few months ago, and she's hanging out with dear old Dad, and we're in this conference, and she says, Dad, can I go hang out with my friends? I said, sure, that's fine. No problem. And so she goes and hangs out with her friends. While she's gone, I go to the cafe. I get a drink. I get all kinds of stuff. I come back, and she comes back beside me. She says, where's mine? I said, well, you weren't hanging out with me, so you didn't get any. You were off with your friends instead. So it was just a note for you teens. Maybe it's good to hang with your parents sometimes. Throw it in there. Not bitter, though. I'm not bitter about it. It's good. Here's how we filter what to say no to and what to say yes to. What's the why? What am I giving up? Am I loving God? Am I loving people with my decision? Is this decision leading me or others closer to Jesus? See, 1 Corinthians 10, 23 and 24 just lays it out there for us. You'll see it on the screen. It says, looking at it one way, you could say anything goes because of God's immense generosity and grace. We don't have to dissect and scrutinize every action to see if it will pass muster. But the point is not to just get by. We want to live well, but our foremost effort should be to help others live well. You see, this verse basically sums up intentionality. Can I do it? Well, yeah, you can do it. Should I do it? Maybe not. Maybe not. I want to say yes to the right things. Not every good thing is the right thing in the moment. Not every good thing is the right thing in that moment. Ephesians 5 says it this way, 15 through 17. Be careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. You see, it makes it pretty cut and dry with that verse. I can choose to be wise or I can choose to be unwise. There's no gray area in between. I got to make the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Does anyone in the room feel like sometime your day is against you? The days may be evil. You've had a rough day. It happens. Our days are against us. So don't be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. You see, this is the point where there's a fork in the road for all of us in this verse, because the practical information that I've given you, yeah, I should live a life of intentionality. Yeah, I should plan out my day. Yeah, my productivity begins with my thought process. But see, in order for us to really understand how to be wise, I've got to know what the Lord's will is. So whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, you can apply the other things to your life, but here's where it becomes very clear in God's word that the only way that I can live a wise life is to know God's will for me. I've got to follow him. I've got to know him. I've got to have a relationship with Jesus, because otherwise I'm living foolishly. You see, Jesus is the perfect example of living a wise life. You can look all throughout the Gospels and you can see the way that Jesus was intentional with his time. He knew what his call was. He knew what his purpose was. He knew what he was supposed to be doing. He said no to the wrong things and yes to the right things. But in his days, he filled them with deep relationships. He filled them with prayer. He filled them with rest. I know I need some rest. We got to fill our days with the right things. You see, Jesus is the perfect example. He made time for everything. He made time for the right things, the things that God had called him to. You see, the way that I live a life of purpose is this. I set my schedule up in a certain way, and my schedule should be set up for God to show off. You see, I can't control everything that happens in my day, but my schedule should be set up so that God can show off. How do I start my day? I look at it and say, God, how are you going to show off today? God, how can you use me to impact those around me? God, how can you make a difference in my day today? It starts by saying yes to him. I want God to show off. Romans 12, 1 and 2 says it this way. So here's what I want you to do. God helping you take your everyday, ordinary life, you're sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around life and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing that you can do for him. You see, when we schedule a life of intentionality focused on God, he takes our ordinary life and he makes it extraordinary. He takes our story and uses it for his glory. He makes a difference in our day. Not because of how I want to schedule the day, but because I'm saying, God, I'm setting my day before you. I'm putting the important things first in my life. So what does that mean? How can I practically live that out? What if I made room in my schedule for things that matter? What if I say every Thursday in my schedule, I'm going to send an encouraging text to somebody in my life? It takes 30 seconds, but it's a day changer for someone. What if I block off my schedule to make sure that I leave work at a certain time so I can spend it with my kids or my spouse? Teenagers, what if you block off a certain time in your week during your lunch hour to go eat with the kid who looks on the outside in at relationships? You're allowing God to show off in your life. See, I want to make God famous. I want to start my day by saying, God, I want you to be famous. Your schedule, my schedule is your day. It's not that my day has to be filled with the extravagant. It's filled with expectation that God is going to do something to live out my life of purpose. The verse goes on to say this: don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out. Readily recognize what he wants from you and quickly respond to it. I want to create a schedule in which I'm ready to respond to God at any moment. I can't control how my day goes all the time. Actually, most of the time. I can't control my day. Things happen. I mentioned earlier that our days seem evil, and many of you raised your hand and said, I've had some rough days. I can't control how my day goes. But I can say yes to God. I can say, use my day. I can remember this. The success of my schedule is not based on my activities, but rather the attitude behind them. I can set my day up with expectation, but what happens when things go wrong is that no matter what is actually happening in my schedule, I have an attitude of knowing that God's going to do something. I have an attitude realizing that God loves me and he wants to do exceptional things through me. A few weeks ago, my family, we were moving into a new house, and we had been excited the last few months to move into this house because it was a bigger house. Now, how many of you guys know when you have 5 kids, you need a lot of space in your house? Yeah, we had more space. We were pumped, and we had planned how the day would go of the move. We'd been so excited about it. We knew we were going to get the moving truck. We were going to go paint. We were going to put the beds together. We were going to get everything ready to go and have everything moved in that evening. Had our day planned out. So the morning happens, my daughter wakes up, my oldest daughter wakes up, and she says, Dad, my neck hurts. I don't know if I can go to school. And of course, I was going to push my day through. I'm like, you're going to school. You can go. So I took her to school, and I get a phone call from my wife, and she says, I've been in a car accident. I've rear-ended somebody. She hadn't been in a car accident in 20 years, and it happens the day we were moving. Everybody in the car was okay, but it set our day back a little bit. We go to the house and we begin to put the beds together, and we realize we don't have all the parts to put the bed together. I get a phone call from my daughter at school. She says, pick me up because I can't move my neck. Get a phone call from my son. I've forgotten my lunch. We had some dear friends that were watching our other kids. We get a phone call from them at the end of the day. Says, we need you to come pick up Everett, our 1-year-old, because he's dropped something on his toe. And there's blood everywhere. So my wife took Everett to the ER. She was there for 7 hours on this day that we had planned out completely. But you know what I realized in that day is that God had set that day up for a purpose, and I'd allowed him, even though it had not gone the way I wanted it to, that my attitude was set up that God had put us in this place for a reason, and he gets the credit and he gets the glory for every good thing that happens throughout that day. And so the day began with the praise and the day ended with the praise. I started the day when my wife was in a car accident. God, I thank you that nobody was hurt, because this day is a rough day. The days are evil. God, I thank you that no one in our family was hurt. When Everett went to the hospital, God, I thank you that he had no broken bones. I thank you that he was okay. I thank you that he walked out of there with a little antiseptic and a Band-Aid, and that was it. You see, my kids were able to see God show up, because all throughout the day they were like, man, this is a rough day. God must be doing something big. I'm like, he is. He set us up into this place for a reason, and we were able to experience his grace and his love even throughout the chaos of a day that we hadn't planned. So I want to create my day in a way so that God can show off no matter what happens in my schedule. So here's what I'm going to ask you today. Close your eyes for me for just a minute. But I want to ask you that question of, have you allowed God to show up and show off in your life through your schedule? Have you made room for him to do amazing things through you? God wants to show up, but we have to say yes to him. We've got to say, God, you get my day. You get every minute. You get every hour of everything that I do. See, we can live a life schedule, but if God is not the center of that equation, we miss the point. We're foolish with our days. And so if you're in the room right now, it's your moment to acknowledge that you need to let God show up and show off in your life. And so if you've been living a life of hurry and scurry and not allowing God to do what he wants to do in your life, it's your time to say, God, it's your moment now to do something. It's acknowledging that you need him in this moment. So if that's you, if you're in the room right now and you're like, I need to make God the priority in my life, just put your hand up in the room. Just put your hand up in the room. See, we may have been following Jesus for a long time, but this is the truth that we can live out right now. God, I want to make you a priority in my life. You can put your hands down. Whether you're making that exact decision today to let God show up and show off in your life, or you've been following Jesus and you've been planning him into your day every single day, this is a prayer that we can say together. So repeat after me. Father God, I love you, and I thank you that you have a call on my life. You have a purpose for my day. Let me fulfill my purpose each and every day. God, show up and show off in my life today and in the days to come. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you for watching the service today. If you began or renewed your relationship with Jesus today, or you need prayer for something going on in your life, please let us know. If you're watching on a computer, you can do that by clicking on one of the buttons below. Or if you're watching us on the Community Church app, you can select Contact Us under the About Us tab. We'd love to know your story and how Jesus is using Community Church to impact your life. Thanks again for hanging out with us, and we hope you'll keep watching and taking next steps in your relationship with Jesus.